is for your Gmail forwarding, what it needs to look like. You need to enable POP first. Well, before that, when you log into Gmail, there's a little gear on the upper right corner of the screen in Gmail on your browser. It'll take you this screen. You'll click forwarding and POP, enable POP. You will make sure enable IMAP is radio button is enabled, and save changes. Okay, so keep this screen right here so I can come by to make sure you know how to get there and you know how to save the changes. I want to make sure everybody does that first in your Gmail account. If you've already done it, it won't hurt to do it again. So you're not going to hurt anything if you duplicate what you've already done. So again, the little gear when you log into Gmail on the right side, go to the screen I have on the overhead, which is forwarding and POP, and make sure everything's checked with the little red arrows like I have on the overhead, 1, 2, and 3, steps 1, 2, and 3, and you're done. Yep, forwarding and POP. And just make sure you do steps 1, 2, and 3 as is on the overhead. You're good there. And what I did was I re-downloaded or re-uploaded that code.
Okay.
And it's not the first 2 links in the homework. It's going to be the very bottom link that I uploaded or updated. So I believe it's the same code, but just to be safe, I uploaded it again. Okay, cool.
What are you talking about?
Do what now?
What code? For what?
This is for the homework we're going to go over in a second. Just make sure you've done those 3 steps on your Gmail account, everybody. Even if you've done it already, it's not going to hurt to do it again.
Quick question.
Yep. You don't need to worry about anything below number 3. Yeah, just go to number 3, or yeah, technically number 2, and then number 3 is just save changes. So once you've done that, I'm going to show you on the overhead with everything done correctly. Yes. Good. How it's supposed to look after it works on your app. And again, I've already got mine uploaded to an external host. This SMTP test does sometimes not work on your local host. So if it doesn't work, which you already had that happen earlier with you, that's normal. So, yes. The gear, you have to be in Gmail. You're not in Gmail. See where it says Gmail on the top? It said Gmail right there on the very top row. Gmail. Very top right, there's a gear. Top right. Click on the gear itself. Yep. And then forwarding and POP. Yeah, you're right. It does. Forwarding and POP. You're not on forwarding and POP yet. There you go. And then enable IMAP and scroll down on the bottom and save. All right, cool. Well, let me show you here real quick what it looks like when it's working. So here is the, if you go to our in-class practice lab, the link I'm going to be showing you is this link right here. I'll go ahead and do it. If everybody hits it at one time, it might crash on us, so I'll just click this one myself and show you what it looks like here. There's a simple page here. This first example just shows you have to enter in a full name, enter in my full name, and an integer value. I'll go and put in number 1. And notice it says my name, and then it says variable cannot be less than 1,000. Validation denied. So I'm going to change this to 1,001. Hit submit. Now it says my name, and then variable is valid. Everybody see that? Okay. And so this is just simple validation. That's all we're looking at here, simple validation. The next one, though, error exception 2, shows on the form, and it emails me to my Gmail account. The second one does. So I'm going to click on this error 2. And there's actual bad code in there that's going to throw an error. And it says in here, errors have occurred. The administrator has been contacted with the error. Please try again. Let me show you my Gmail account. There's the error that just came in. It says error message 2. str replace expects at least 3 parameters. 2 are given. It gives a direct path on my server to that file, and it gives the line it threw it on, which is error line 41. Everybody see that on the overhead? And so this is a good detailed error message. So during development and even after you release a PHP app, when you have try catches in your code, and all try catches are is it tries a portion of code. If it catches that portion of code, meaning it errors, it emails you immediately what the error is. So as a developer, you can immediately see errors that people have had on your site and fix them immediately. Okay, instead of people calling you up or emailing you, you can get direct emails from the users. Now let me show you real quick on this one. The code for this one is actually inside of this zip file here for the source week 8 in our InClass lab. I'm going to go over that real quick. You can download that, or you can just look at mine if you want to on the overhead. But in the week 8 InClass lab, I want to look at some code. The first one is the index file. That was the web page that you saw where it had error exception 1, error exception 2. Okay? The error exception 1 went to a post called exception.php. Let's look at that. And all this page does or did was grabbed in the number from the form. And remember, underscore post brings in the variable from the form that was just submitted. And we're using the variable number was used in that prior form. It puts it into variable X. It also posts and gets a full name that I filled in on the form. Then it does a try catch. See, number 4 is try, number 18 is a catch exception, and this is the end of the try. Now, try catches are used in every single programming language. I'm a Windows developer full-time as well. It's in there. iOS developer, it's in there. PHP developer, it's in there. Okay? So try catches are used in code to try a section of code. If it catches, throw an error and do something with it. Make the message nice to the user, number 1. Number 2, you can alert the programmers of the error with exact information and exact line of code where it's found. That's the whole purpose of it. Okay, and I've actually done this for years in my programming, to where when I create a program for users, I put these try catches everywhere, put these error catches to where it emails me to a Gmail account, and I know immediately before they can even tell me usually where the error is, what's happened, and be fixing it before they even contact me. And so you'll notice in the try, it says if it is a numeric, we're okay. If it's not a numeric, it's going to throw an exception that says username is going to come in fine, but notice it says variable must be a number. So this is numeric, is going to test to see if this X value is a numeric. And remember that X value comes from the numeric number where it says enter an integer. That's all it says. Doesn't say between 1 and 1,000 or over 1,000, it just says enter an integer. So if it is a numeric, then left bracket and right bracket in the true statement, lines 8, 9, and 10, it's going to take and validate or convert that X to a number with int val, put it into the X variable, and then in this if statement, if X is less than 1,000, it's going to throw a new exception. Username is going to be in that exception, and then variable cannot be less than 1,000. Now both these lines on line 10 and line 14, when it calls a throw new exception, it's going to throw it down here to the catch on line 18. And notice in line 18, it does an echo of the message, all right? Notice it says exception, line greater than symbol, get message. What this is doing is getting the message that's thrown here. So this line right here on this echo command where it says exception, get message, that whole line I just highlighted, or that whole section of code, it's getting the contents of this new exception on 14 or new exception on 10 echoed out. And then the next line is just to make it look nice, puts a space, a dash, and validation denied. So let me go back real quick and show you that code again, and what it looks like real quick, because I only did one validation portion of that one. So let's not put a number in. Let's put the letter A in here. Okay, so I have my name, the letter A, hit submit. Notice it said variable must be a number. It caught it in that first if statement where it said it must be a number. If it's not a number, it catches it. So this whole error right here is the exception that was thrown, the new exception. If I go back, now make it a number I know is invalid. Variable cannot be less than 1,000, validation denied. Then finally make it something I know it is. Now it's going to be valid. Okay, so that's the first error. That's error number 1, error exception number 1 we just went over. Now I want to go over error exception number 2. The error exception number 2 link, if you look on the overhead, let's look at that real quick. On error exception number 2, let's make sure you know what I'm talking about here. It's this link right here, error number 2. It just goes to another PHP page, which throws an error and emails me. And I already showed you the email. So let's look at error exception number 2. The page that I want to throw a error for a purpose. Now, this one is a very detailed example of an error message, okay? Because remember in that email I showed you, it gave me, not only was there an error, it showed me the exact message of the error, what file it was found on, and the file path on the server, and the line the error was thrown, okay? And that's important for a developer because an app I just finished last year for a company here in town was 1,750,000 lines of code. Okay, and it's grown since then. It's got 400,000 more lines of code in the last year. And so you can imagine if we don't put try catches in our code, how a nightmare it would be to figure out where did this error come from. Okay, and so let's look at this detailed error message and break it down. The first is going to include a error function module called error.php that we'll come back to in a second, but that's going to give us some data to pull with and some variables to pull with to get in some nice error message to send to an email. So the second one is it's bringing in post email. In this case, it's bringing in an email form. And notice on this one, it says function error or function handler, error type, error message, error file, error line. Then it gives a nice echo statement. But these are all commented out because I make it look nicer down here. So let's look at that down here real quick. I just echo out a better looking error, page error. Errors have occurred while executing this page. The administrator has been contacted with the error. This is what the user sees, okay? Now, I'm going to set the error handler to be used on this line. I just have a set error handler called handler. I set the string with professor spelled wrong. String variable, professor, Congo is great. And then I echo out and do a replacement of professor with the correct spelling of professor. All right? So let me go back real quick Let me go back to the page I clicked on. Okay, this is error, week 8 error exception 2 or exception 2. When I click on error 2, it's going to that page. Better looking page error. Errors have occurred while executing this page. The administrator has been contacted with the error. Please try again. So I actually forced an error to happen. Here's the actual code that the user saw on the page right down here. This one right here, these 3 lines of code is what the user saw on the page. But notice the next line, process error, error type, error message, error file, and error line. All of those have been processed, okay? And that actually comes from this include statement, error.php file, I want to show you. In the error.php file, this one here is a general email form, okay, but it's got some errors in it on purpose. And when I come down here to the bottom of the page, I'm forcing an error to be processed here by calling the process error function. And the process error function was actually created in the PHP It's actually a command in PHP, process error. And in process error, it has in there some variables that you need to put in there. One is the error type, one's the error message, error file, and error line. And so when I check the email, or my email account, let's do that again. Okay, the error message is error type 2. The error message is str replace expects 3 parameters, 2 were given, and it's on the exception2.php file, error line 41. So let's look at error line 41 to make sure that's correct. I'm going to go to error line 41 on this page here, and let's see if that's indeed true. Okay, there's error line 41. str replace, how many arguments do I put in there? An error line replace, or an error in str replace. Supposed to have 3, I put 2, that's why it threw an error, okay? And it's going to need 3, because notice I put up here what it should have. It should have the wrong name, the right naming, and then string variable. String variable is a source that it's replacing. I left that out on purpose to throw an error, okay? And so by doing this right here, the set error handler, and setting it to handler before this code is ran down here, it actually, and notice here, set error handler, it's color coded, meaning it's a predefined function within PHP. And you can name it whatever you want to. You can name it like with your sessions, your session variables. You can, you know, we've used session variables in here for first name, last name, email, right? We're naming it on this one. The session error handler is, I'm calling it handler in this case. And what that's going to do is all the code below this, if an error occurs, it's going to use that code and process the error with the error type, error message, error file, and error line. So let me go back real quick. I want to look at some notes I have on this. And then we're going to download, I'm going to have you download right now, if you would, the, go ahead and download, we'll do this one in class, even though it's your homework, I want to make sure you understand how to use it. At the bottom of the homework page on week 8, this file right here, I just updated right when class started, the source week8.zip. If everybody could download that to your local computer, after I get through going over the notes, we're going to look at that code and help you out this week to where you know exactly what it is you need to do with that file or with these files that you're downloading for your homework. Because in your homework, if you look on the overhead real quick, this is what your homework's going to look like. And you're going to basically enter in information in a form. You have to make sure you do have a valid email, a valid website. Fill everything in. And then when you hit submit, it's going to take that information, and where do you think it's going to send it? Or should send it? To my email. So it says here, my message was sent successfully. Thank you for contacting us. We'll reply to your inquiry as soon as possible. Now let's check to make sure it came over in my email. There it is. There's the contents of the email I just filled out. Now, granted, it does not look very pretty, but it is all the contents of that email form. That's what you're doing for your homework. So download that zip file, and I'll put it on the overhead. It's right here underneath number 5 where it says week8.zip. If you could download that underneath number 5 where it says source week8.zip. But I want to cover some notes before we go over that code. So, all right. So PHP error handling, I've already showed you some examples already, what it should be used for. One is validation of errors, sending the developer those errors to where they can fix them quickly and promptly. Number 2, it's to put a nice message to the user versus just PHP or code does not work or error in page or something like that. Okay? That's generally what you get with PHP. It just says error in page. That means nothing to a user. But if you put a try catch in there on all of your code and main functions of your code, when an error does occur, you can force a nice message to the screen and email you as a developer to make it look a lot nicer. So, the types of errors, there are 12 unique error types within PHP which can be grouped into 3 main categories. One would be informational errors, like notices, actionable errors, warnings, and fatal errors. Okay, so we have notices, warnings, and fatal. Informational errors are very harmless, can be avoided through use of explicit programming. In fact, when we come back from break, I will show you, I've already showed somebody in here how to hide error. Who was that? Okay, I showed in the back row, I showed you how to hide errors. We'll show you how to do that, called depreciate your errors on all of your files. We'll show you how to do that to where errors are hidden or informational errors are hidden that maybe users don't need to see, but you need to see them during development. An example here is like an undefined variable, defining a string without quotes, maybe a variable that wasn't used. That would also be a informational error that users really could care less to see and don't need to see on a production website. All right, but during development of it, informational errors are generally kept on. Actionable errors indicate that something wrong, clearly wrong, has happened and an action should be taken, like file not present, database not available, missing function arguments like the email error I just got earlier where I had that str replace. It should have 3 arguments. I only put in 2 arguments. That's an actionable error. Okay? Fatal errors is something so terrible has happened during the execution of your script that further processing simply cannot continue. All right? This could be a parsing error, calling an undefined function in your code that doesn't exist, etc. And those are fatal errors. So identifying errors, there's some built-in PHP functions to identify errors. One is eStrict. This is a feature or behavior is depreciated. This feature is depreciated, and that's what it means. It's no longer available in PHP 6 that we use. eNotice is a detection of a situation that could indicate a problem but might be normal. eUser notice, user triggered notice. eWarning, an actionable error occurred during execution. eUser warning, a user triggered warning. eCompile warning, Error occurred during script compilation. This is unusual, an unusual error. E core warning, an error occurred during PHP initialization of an engine. E error is an unrecoverable error in PHP code execution. E user error is a user trigger fatal error. E compile error is a critical error occurred while trying to read a script. E core error occurs if PHP engine cannot start up. And E parse is raised during compilation in response to some syntax error, spelling error in your code. Yes?
For me, you've done all inputs.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. And there's some that are not in here that I'll show you after break. These are some of the main ones that are in there. But you're right, I did use one E all, I believe, on yours, and E deprecate, which is it basically stops all your warnings of all your errors from showing on your site. So notice on the right side, you've got notices, warnings, and fatal, all color-coded there on the right side of the screen. And like I said, after break, we'll go into we'll go into some detail on what you can put at the top of all of your pages during production to where it hides the notices and warnings, okay? Because those you want hidden. Users don't need to see those. Fatal errors, you definitely want them, you want to be able to see those and be able to compile those, but notices and warnings you don't need. So is it possible, causing errors, is it possible, or it is possible, to cause PHP at any point in your script to cause an error by using this trigger error function? So trigger underscore error, message and type will trigger an error. So if you put this on any line of code in PHP, in the PHP wrapper, opening, closing PHP tags, this will throw an error. An example would be if DB connection fails, there's no DB connection, trigger error, DB con failed, e-user error. Okay? That's a trigger error that you're asking PHP to specifically call, and you're creating it with the trigger error function. So PHP error handling, here's an example of a diagram of a PHP error function. So you could have an example. Was, in the triangle starting here, was the top three internally generated errors non-fatal, and generated errors called via trigger error. So we started those three at the top, and we work our way down, okay? So we'll start at the left one, internal generated errors, fatal errors. The first question is PHP internal error handler display and or log error. For this example here, it only has an option to go down. Was this error fatal? If it was not fatal, continues execution. If it was fatal, halt execution, okay? The top two on the right goes to a custom error handling that you've defined, or looks for one. If you haven't defined it, it says no. If you haven't defined it, goes again to this one, displays the internal built-in function error to the user. Is it fatal? If it's not, continues on. If it is fatal, it halts execution. If you do create a custom error defined like I've done tonight for both your in-class and also for your homework this week, then a call user defined error handler is called. Was it fatal? If it wasn't, continue. If it was, it halts execution. Okay. In mine, for the email, I actually, the one that I wrapped for the str replace example, it actually would be a actionable error, not a fatal error, an actionable error. So that means it would continue, but I put a nice message to the user where they didn't know what the error was. It just said, hey, administrator's been contacted. They will let you know when things are up and going, something like that. That makes sense? And so you want to put a nice error message to the general users on your website. If anything ever happens, like say a database goes down, a nice message comes up to the user. I apologize for the inconvenience. We apologize for the inconvenience. We're looking into this right now. Administrators have been contacted. Please try again later, something like that. And then you as administrator of that app would get an email like I just showed you of a detail of that error, the error type, the error message, the file location, and the exactly what line it was on in that file. Okay, so you can within seconds go to that file, notice, oh, database is down, database error, database is down. Maybe the server's down, possibly. That could be a number one reason usually. Restart the web server that has hosted the PHP, the MySQL database, and you're up and running. Okay, but the whole purpose for this week's exercise on error handling is to nicely handle errors, because you will have them in your code, whether it's something you've done yourself with syntax or calling a function that's not there, to a database going down, and you want a nice error in all three of those scenarios to kick up to the screen to the user and then email you immediately what those errors are, okay? Because we've all had errors maybe in applications, both Windows applications, web applications. It gives us an ugly error on the page. We don't know what it is that's going on, but it gives us an error on the page. And what's people's first reaction, or what's your first reaction when that happens? What's your first thought? Keep doing it again. And maybe after the 5th time or 10th time, whatever, you finally do what? Give up, or maybe restart your browser, do it a couple more times. But there's no message, right? There's no nice message like, oh, by the way, oops, we see something's down. That's a popular one today too on websites. It just says, oops, something's wrong, we're looking into it. That's fine. I mean, Google does that, Chrome does that. You do want to, depending on the website, you might not want to oops on a, corporate 500 business, but you do want something that's a nice message to where the user sees it. They're like, okay, I get it, something's down. I'll try again in a couple hours, no big deal, okay? The one thing you don't want to do for a public app is give your email address out, or to give any time frame out of when it can be fixed. That'd be a nightmare. But if it's an internal app for users of say 10 or 15 people, you can then tell them, hey, the developer will contact you, or Chuck will contact you within 24 hours or within an hour to tell you what's going on. That way it's more personalized. So in internal apps for companies, you can make a more personalized message and a more time-sensitive message. Public apps on the web, not so much. I wouldn't recommend that, because your emails will get flooded, number one. Number two, if you gave them a time frame, it could really cause problems, especially if it's something beyond your control. Like say it's a SQL server goes down, and maybe the SQL server for that website is hosted off-site and you don't control it. So you really have no control over when it's going to come back up. And so those are reasons not to give any time on a turnaround. But if you give a user a nice error message like I've shown you, that helps tremendously. So when you customize an error handler message, generally how PHP handles errors is defined in the php.ini file located in your installation. XAMPP has one of these in the XAMPP installation. And there are several ways to control your scripts though, however, not just use a built-in messages for PHP. One is error reporting. Error reporting is one way to control these errors. Error reporting, and then notice it says level. This function can be used to control which errors are displayed and which are simply ignored. Now remember the different levels we had? We have kind of like the promptings, the actionable, and the kind of informational, actionable, and then finally fatal. Those are the three levels. Informational, and actionable, and fatal. So the effect only lasts for that duration of that page that you're on currently, okay? So these would have to be used at the top of every page, this error reporting, then whatever level. So here's an example. And you can use these, we're going to do this after break, but you can definitely use these and play with them now. if you put at the top of your pages these notices for error reporting settings, it'll override the built-in php.ini settings. So let's say you want to turn off all error reporting altogether, everything, from the promptings to the actionable to the fatal. Error reporting 0. We'll do it. Report simple running errors. You would do error reporting, error, warning, and parse. That means it's only going to show these type of errors. Okay. Then reporting notice can be good too, to report on uninitialized variables. So you can throw in there notice for variables or maybe catch a misspelling. And then reporting all errors except notice. And remember, notice is for variables that are maybe misspelled or uninitialized variables. That would be the all and the notice. So notice it says report all errors except notice. This here is the except key. And we'll report all errors except for the notice error. Report all PHP errors, _all. We'll report all PHP errors. Do I know? That just separates them by the type of error that they can report. It concatenates them together. You can use both ampersands or you can use a pipe. Yep. So to set error reporting settings, hiding errors is not a solution to your problem. That's a no-brainer, right? Just because you hide them doesn't mean they're there, not there. It is useful, though, however, to hide errors produced on a live server. So for developers, you want to see everything. You want to see all the errors for sure. But when it's going to production, if it's an uninitialized integer or if it's an uninitialized variable, something like that, and it still runs fine, that's okay. But you definitely want to fix it as soon as you find it. While developing and debugging, you want to display all errors, which is highly recommended. And by default, by the way, if you don't have any of the errors I just showed you on prior slide here, if you don't have any of these on, by default, it's going to show all. Okay? So suppressing errors, the special @ character or @ operator can be used to suppress function errors. This is any error produced by a function is suppressed and not displayed by PHP, regardless of the error reporting setting. So in this example here, you'll notice a DB connection. The DB connection here, @ is the actual suppressing part of it. The @ MySQL connect, we use this in here already with the config.php files, connecting to the database. This would actually suppress the error, but notice I put a trigger error in there. What does that do? What does the trigger error do here? You ready? The trigger _ error. I suppressed it on the DB line, meaning it's not going to throw an error there. Even if, let's say the connection's wrong on host, username, and password, it's incorrect on one of those three. With this @ symbol, it suppresses it. But notice here it says if not database, meaning database is not there. I don't have one. This trigger _ error forces an error. Okay? This is a forced error. I just forced it myself as a developer. And I'm telling the error, in the trigger error, the first argument is the label, blah, or it could be data connection, whatever. Data connection not found, database not found, error in database connection, whatever you want to put in there. And then _ user error. Okay? It needs 2 arguments in a trigger. Name, label, description, whatever you want to call it, comma, and then usually for trigger errors, it's always _ user error that you're going to use. Because it's a user error you're defining. You're defining this error, not the code. You are. You're telling it, this is a message I want to send to the user, to myself, and I know exactly what it is. Okay, because I created it. I created the trigger error myself. Even though the database is not connected, I don't want the ugly PHP error. I want my own error that I made myself. And it's going to catch it in the if statement because database isn't going to be connected. It's going to catch it, but I want to catch it with my own error. Does that make sense? I want to define it with my own error. So here we suppressed it with the @ symbol in front of MySQL. This attempts to connect to a database. We've already seen this in the config.php file. We started using that week 2 in the InClass lab. And then this attempts to connect to it, suppresses the error if the notice fails. Since the error is suppressed, it must be handled gracefully, and that's a nice word for what we're talking about. You want your errors to be handled gracefully. Now, is everything we're talking about tonight take more work or less work from a developer? You're already figuring out code, right? Yeah.
Less in the long run.
Less in the long run, actually, you're right, because if you do it right the first time, it's going to take longer developing it and taking time to put these try catches in here and put these error messages in here. But in the long run, it's going to save you time because you're not having to search a million lines of code to figure out where in the world this error came from. Okay? Be on the phone and go, did you remember what it said on the screen? Did it give you a file name or a line name? Users are going to be like, no, I shut the browser down 10 minutes ago. Right? They're not going to tell you that. They're not going to remember that. They don't care. It just doesn't work. All right? So this is going to save you in the long run by putting all this in, but it does take work. And the reason I use this in every application that's a production application is because I literally have probably 30, 40, 50 applications out there in production mode that every once in a while throw an error, and when they throw an error, I can tell immediately what's wrong. It's generally not the code because the code's finished, but it tells me stuff like database is down. User entered in the wrong value when they should have entered in, say they entered in a number and they should have entered in a character or something, I don't know. But I have a log of all the files. I know exactly what happened, when it happened, who did it, at what time it happened. And then that way you can rectify it and fix it much quicker if you have all that information. And so, but it does take more work on the front end, but it definitely helps in the long run. So error suppression is not a solution. We already mentioned that. It can be used, useful though, to locally define your own error handling mechanisms. If you suppress any errors, you must check for them yourself elsewhere. So my logic that I use in programming is I don't suppress any errors. I try to keep my code as clean as possible as I'm coding. So if I see errors that pop up, like informational errors, like variables not used, variables not defined, syntax error, those things you can fix quickly. Again, it takes time, but you can fix them. So as you're developing, you'll get errors, whether it be syntax, function calls, whatever. Fix those as it goes on. Then what you do want to suppress, though, at the very end before it goes to live production, is suppress all the errors. But guess what? You suppress them for the user just not to see the ugly errors, but you define your own error mechanism within the code, your own error functions within the code, to where, number one, the user gets a nice message. Number two, you get the nice email telling you exactly what happened, when it happened, what file it's at, the exact path of that file and the file name, and the line it's at. Okay? That helps you tremendously to keep track of it. Now, in Windows developing, I've actually taken it a step further. I take a screenshot of the computer monitor or monitors exactly when the error occurs. It sends me not only the error message, much like the PHP one I showed you, but also attaches a picture of the monitor's screenshot at the time of the error. So I can see where the error occurred, what they were doing on their computer. I can see how many applications were running. I can see everything, okay, at the time it happened. And it's helped a lot whenever they say, well, I've been entering in this, and you're like, let me send you the error file. And he shows them a screenshot of exactly what they've been doing, that they've been saying they've not been doing, which is maybe they supposed to maybe enter in, say, I don't know, let's just say it's a seven-digit number, and they've been entering in 6 digits instead of 7, or they've been putting a letter in there, or whatever the case may be. And so that helps you as a developer, because people, you've heard the customer's always right, correct? And what I do is I'll say, well, I'm going to go ahead and look into this, but while I'm looking into it, I'm going to send you, well, what I've done in the last year, I changed the logic to where basically I get the error message and the screenshot. They also get the same thing, but I have a line at the bottom of this code of the email that says for developer use only at the bottom, that has all my stuff in it. But at the top, it gives them the error message, a nice error message, but it also shows them the screenshot. And they know I got the screenshot. And so that stops a lot of calls, because if the users are doing something they shouldn't be doing with the app, whatever it might be, and they know you got a screenshot of exactly what they were doing at the time, it limits the calls, believe me, because they can't say, well, I was entering this, and then they look at the screenshot and they go, well, I can't say that because it shows me entering that. Okay, and so that does help in Windows developing. In PHP developing, you can do screenshots, but it's a little bit more obtrusive and takes a little bit more user interaction to do that. So I don't do that, but I do the email suppression or email sending of all errors, and it tells me exactly where it's at, and that helps tremendously. So custom error handling, you can write your own function to handle PHP errors in the way you want. You simply need to write a function with your appropriate inputs, register it in your script as an error handler. The error handler function should return 4 arguments and be returned true to indicate it has been handled. So here's an example of an error handler. Function, error handler, and then notice the 4 arguments. Error code, error message, file, and line number. Echoing out, an error has occurred with a BR tag to wrap it to a new line. On file, whatever file it is, line, whatever line it is, problem, whatever the message problem is, and then return true. So in your code, you'd actually call it, well, go over these again. Number 1 is the error code, the error message, the file where it occurred, and the line number. Any PHP statements you want to be executed in there, echo statements is fine. And then a return variable to let PHP know that a custom error handler has handled the error okay. And we did this in a code. I just showed it to you earlier. The function then needs to be registered as a custom error handler. So set error handler, and notice that matches the name of the function, error handler, right up here. So set error handler, error handler. You can mask the custom error handler so it only receives certain types of errors. An example, to register custom handling just for triggered errors. In order to do that, you would do a set error handler, comma, after the name, and then whatever it is you're wanting to handle. In this case, it's user notices, warnings, and errors, and that's it. If you leave out the comma, whatever, it's going to handle all your errors with that one function. Custom error handler is never passed an eparse, an ecore error, or an ecompile error. These would be considered too dangerous to pass in a custom error. During development time, you'll see these though in real time. Often used in conjunction with debug for a neat combination of debug and production code. So reviewing various different types of error handling that you can have. The error handling system is highly flexible. You can add your own error handling method, can be developed. And so real quick, let me switch and go right back to the code I was on earlier. Okay. Now what is it here I'm highlighting? I'm going to highlight the whole thing real quick. What have I just highlighted for you in this code? What is that? What did I just highlight? Guess. We've just been talking about it. What is it? a custom error handler, right? This is my custom error handler for this error app I just showed you earlier tonight, first class. I called it handler. Notice it has 4 arguments: type, message, file, and number. And notice here, I process the error type, error message, error file, error number. You say, where's that going? Remember the top of this code, I had an include statement for error.php. Remember that right up here? Let's go to that. Notice I have a function in here called process error. And what it's doing is using my Gmail connections, okay, my cconkel@gmail.com connections, it's including that email.php file we're going to go over in just a second. Gives me the app name, I call it exception app, the message I want to show in the email, the error type, error message, error file name, error lines. And this, by the way, is all going to be put in the message of the email. Right here I'm highlighting. That's the message of the email. That's the subject line of the email. That's my email it's going to be sent to. And right down here is who I'm sending it from, which is a do not reply. Okay, so if I was sending this to users, if they got this as well, I would put a do not reply at whatever. And if they did send it to that do not reply, it wouldn't go anywhere. It's a do not reply. It doesn't exist. Okay. Then the body comes from here, number 9, the message. Subject line, error. Alt body, this would show up if they couldn't view HTML, which all email browsers let you do that now. Then I convert the body into an HTML here with the MSG HTML. I add in the original email address and the web app name, which is exception app. And then I send it with the mail send. So that's all done in the, I get all of that from including that error.php file. And you'll notice down here at the bottom, the process error, this line here is sent to that email, that error.php file right there. The process error is sent to the file error.php because I included it and have all the functions of it. So when it gets to the actual line of code, I set the error handler, called handler, because that's the function I used to remember up here. Called it handler. It can be called whatever you want to. I call this one handler. There's the string again. And I do a str replace, which takes 3, and I only put in 2. So if I actually do something here, if I wanted to show you, I could take this, get rid of another one, and just put 1 in there. The error would say, hey, by the way, this argument takes 3, you only gave 1. So that's the problem. And it's on line 41, by the way, where to find it at. And so once it kicks that error out, and it sends it via email, you get this nice message. Error message, type 2, which is actionable. str replace, accepts 3, only 2 are given. The exact path on my server to that file, and the exact airline code where it's found at. Okay? And so you can see how that could help when you're getting into some code that's getting into the thousands and 2000s and millions lines of code. And you're working with 20 developers or whatever on it. And so, and once you create an error handler like we just looked at tonight and use it, it can be reused over and over again in your code everywhere. You could put an include statement at the top of every page that would have the function for that error handler. And then you basically would use that include statement like I've done in this app, use that include statement everywhere. So here's my include statement for the error.php file, but I could actually put in that error.php file this function handler as well. Could be put in that error.php file. So I could include even the function handler inside the error.php file. Then all I'd have to do at the top of my code, everywhere I wanted to set an error handler myself, right there, that's it. Set error handler after the include statement, and I've got the error handler, custom error handler on every one of my pages. And it's going to send errors to my Gmail account and a nice message to the user's screen every time. Make sense? And so let's do this. Did everybody get the file downloaded, the PHP file? Files downloaded? I want to look at that code now if we could. So let me go and switch over here to, first of all, let me go to the structure of the files you downloaded first. Let me go that before we look at the code. So when you download those files for your homework, you should have gotten two folders, a PHP folder and a validate folder. Is that correct? Let's go into the validate folder first. This is just two PHP files and an HTML file. The index.php file is just a form file where the user fills out some form information. They fill it out. It puts a post to validate.php that validates input. If everything's good and kosher and everything works great and everything's valid, then it's going to send it to the email, or it's going to send it to the thanks and say thank you for filling out this form. But prior to that, it's going to send it to this PHP folder. Now notice in the PHP folder there's a lot of files in the PHP folder. And these files you will not edit except for one file. Okay? There's one file, and this is a PHP mailer function that's very, very popular. And the one file you'll edit is the email.php file. I've already got that one opened here. So let's go to that one real quick. The email.php file, which looks like this. And notice it requires a class.php mailer.php. It creates a new PHP mailer. It's using SMTP, the SSL of Gmail, ports 465, true authentication. So all of those you don't change at all. The only thing you're going to change is username and password. And like I said earlier, on localhost, this doesn't work 9 times out of 10 because of the blocking on the website that you're hosted on, or the domain you're hosted on. So if it doesn't work locally as far as getting the email to send, don't worry about it. It will work externally on 00 web host. And you just, on the username, it's your Gmail account in full, so it'd be cconkle@gmail.com, and then your full password. And then this just tells the class that you're using that it is an SMTP. Now let me try mine on localhost just to see if it works in here. Probably won't, but we'll see here real quick. So while yours is there, let me see if I can start XAMPP real quick, and I'm going to test mine on a localhost environment and see if it works. And I'm on wireless here. I'm not on wired like you guys are, so it might be a little different, but we'll find out here real quick. And I'm going to go ahead and change this to my real stuff, so look away for just a second. In fact, okay, I changed mine real quick there. Now I'm going to go ahead and test it just to see. Okay, I'm on localhost and it worked for me on localhost, so we're good. That code I downloaded then might work hopefully for you guys in here on the LAN. So I just worked on mine on localhost here. I'm wireless though, it might be different, but we'll find out. So you need to put that in your HT docs for week 8. And again, all you need to edit in the code real quick, the only thing you need to edit for this to work right now tonight is in that download that I had you download from week 8 is in the PHP file. You'll edit the email.php with your credentials at the bottom. And make sure when you put in your credentials, you put in your full Gmail account and your password. And let me check my email here real quick to make sure everything came over okay. Yep, there's the email, test@aol.com. Yeah, I failed to test.aol.com, but I put in a fake email address, but the email came in, it looks like. Cool. There it is. I have 2 of them. That's the one that came in. There's the form that came to me. The one that failed in delivery was a test@aol.com because that was an invalid email. It wasn't a valid email I put in there. If that was a valid email, that would actually, somebody else give me your real Gmail account and I'll put yours in here to see if that works. So somebody give me, let me go to the localhost one first real quick. There we go. Okay, somebody give me your Gmail account, the one you're using for tonight's lab.
Web290.
Sarah,
With an H.
is that right? Web 290. Okay, let me blow this up to make sure, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that. Okay, check your Gmail, Sarah, to see if you got a message here. I'll check mine. Might take a little bit.
Yeah, hello, your contact form has been submitted by name, Chuck, icon, email.
Sweet.
And my email.
That's what we want to see. And I'm running mine on localhost. So let me go ahead and I'm going to pause the podcast and come around and see if I can help you guys get yours running on local.